thing is you form a goal. The next thing is you have to plan for that initial meeting or that initial exposure point. And I like to say to the millennials these days, no, you can't wear your big hoop earrings that stretch your ears out. No, you shouldn't have a tattoo going up your neck if you expect a white collar businessman from the old school to invest money in you. You can't cover it up. I know the world tells you to express yourself these days. Well, that's fine. But if you want this.
Yo, what is up? This is Christian D. Evans, host of Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And I just want to share with you real quick, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It really means a lot to us, but also our community. And, if you like this, please share this with your friend, your family, a colleague, someone that you don't even like. Definitely share that with them. And then also leave a comment and a review for us. We really do appreciate that. And show our guests some love if you find that this episode really resonates with you. Secondly, also want to share with you some really awesome news. I've had the Fortune Opportunity Network and have incredible guests, 8 and 9 figure entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders on our podcast. And what we've done is we've actually been able to open up a Be Uncommon If You Can mastermind, where we're able to open up the door for so many of you, right? Those that are 6-figure, 7-figure entrepreneurs that are scaling, that are struggling, that really want to level up their game, their business, their life, whatever it is. I'm able to open up that door for you with this Be Uncommon If You Can mastermind. Now, we're only taking a select few of individuals. So what you'll need to do is go to christiandeevans.com/mastermind-now. And the link is actually in the description as well. Guys, that is christiandeevans.com/mastermind-now. We're only opening this up for a select few of individuals that really want to level up their game. You have a conversation with me, see if you qualify. And guys, enjoy the episode. And remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans, and we have CBD Hemp Energetic entrepreneur on today, guys. He is a CMO of Hemp Synergistics, and he has been in this industry for many years. He's a 7-time 7X founder, innovator, author, and we're going to be diving into some really awesome topics. But the biggest thing is obviously, the hemp CBD. It's got some bad rap in today's culture, and obviously we're going to overcome certain things, certain red flags that certain things that most people think of. And we're going to obviously talk about a lot of really interesting stuff. I just want to share with you, he's an entrepreneur, expert speaker, marketing, project management. He's CMO at Hemp Synergistics, 20 years of entrepreneurial and project management experience in diverse industries and functions, repeatedly yielding exceptional results. Expert speaker in sales psychology. He's written an incredible book, the author of Molecular Influence, which we're going to be diving into a lot today as well. Highly capable of running startups, establishing businesses, scaling businesses, focused on continuous improvement of performance, processes, people, partners, data, and technology to achieve and accomplish the strategic initiatives and achieve organizational goals. My friend, the one and only Russ Cersosimo. How are you doing, my man?
Christian? What's happening?
Hey, I'm really excited about diving into some cool stuff here. So I do know, just like I mentioned in the intro, CBD and hemp, it's got a bad rap in today's culture. What are you seeing are like misconceptions in the industry that you're seeing, and that, maybe you could educate our audience a little bit on like, okay, how to properly look at these misconceptions that CBD and, marijuana and all that shenanigans has a play?
Yeah, I mean, you look at really, we've been indoctrinated in many ways, all over the world. One of those is how we look at hemp and cannabis. This is something that was in our diet dating back 13,000 years. They used it for the Egyptians used to put it in enemas to help with sleep. The Queen of England back in the day was known to use it to keep premenstrual syndrome, at bay. There was a lot of things that we had that it was about 100 different ailments, I should say, around 1937. At the time that we had the U.S. pharmacopoeia, there was about 100 different things that cannabinoids, which are the active ingredients in hemp and cannabis, were used to help treat. It wasn't after 1937. It was actually 1937 when this all became illegal, and it was all because of special interest, most notably the paper industry, as well as DuPont. And a lot of people don't know this, but it was a law that if you had a farm, you had to grow at least 1 hectare of hemp to help supply the U.S. government so that they could make things for war and for the military. In fact, the word canvas is derived from cannabis, believe it or not, because the fibers are so strong. That's how they started making canvas back in the day. But you could use it to make car tires, the fuel that the car runs on, the clothing on your back. I mean, this was a very versatile plant. What happened is there was a shortage back in the day when we were in war, and basically Andrew Mellon got in bed with DuPont, and they decided to come up with something that would be a competitor to hemp. And that's when they manufactured and patented nylon. It was right at that time that the war ended, and all of a sudden there was a surplus on hemp. And it was not only bad for nylon, but it was very bad for the paper industry. So William Randolph Hearst was the guy that owned all the magazines. He owned all the factories that create paper, and he owned all the really the tree farms that would create the raw ingredient. Wasn't good for him. So together they all got together and formed this Reefer Madness campaign where they demonized hemp and cannabis. It wasn't too long before it was wiped off the face of the earth. You know, everyone kind of followed the United States, and really until 1970, you didn't hear much about it until Richard Nixon came around, who was born in that Reefer Madness age and made it the #1 public enemy to get rid of, you know, all things related to cannabis. And they wiped it off the face of the earth as far as research goes. The hippies kept it alive, and they bred it for THC, right? Which was it's the psychoactive ingredient. And that's really why it has an extra bad name, because it only made people high, or that's all they saw. Well, now as it's starting to get into research and we're starting to see what other benefits it has, we're finding that besides THC, there's hundreds of other TH somethings or CB somethings. Like we know CBD works with pain, inflammation, anxiety, and stress. I'm sorry, sleep. There's CBG that works for focus and energy. You have CBN that works for sleep. You have THCV that they're now finding works on blood sugar. And literally you eat one of these gummies with THCV and you don't eat all day. CBC is working for Alzheimer's. So as they're starting to say that these work for certain things, one might also think we didn't have a lot of these problems like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's back 1937, back until the beginning of time. And it's probably because we had this stuff in our system. Now, where this is really interesting is we've all learned in school, and you and I grew up probably the same time. You learned about your circulatory system, your respiratory system, your lymphatic system. There were 11 systems of the body. They just recently identified the endocannabinoid system, which is now the 12th system of the body. And endo means to receive, and cannabinoid is obviously the THCs and CBDs in there. And like they work together like lock and key. And that's the only thing that fits in these receptors are things that are found in the cannabis and hemp plants. And we're realizing as you have a satiated endocannabinoid system, meaning you have these molecules in there, a lot of the problems that people are seeing are going away. And it makes you think, you know, is this because we don't have this in our diet anymore? So as far as the stigma goes, to come back around to answer your question, you know, what I found, I started the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society as an educational nonprofit that would go out and, you know, from the mountaintops, preach this stuff and work with legislators and then researchers, caretakers, you name it. And what we found is when someone sees that one single drop of this stuff could stop seizures in a child that is having 10,000 seizures a year, all of a sudden they're open to hearing more about it. And then they know somebody that it worked for, and then that knows somebody gets closer, and it's my brother started to use it, now he's sleeping better, or my dad's out of pain. So we're starting to see the wave of people are starting to adopt it a little quicker now, and that's because the information's out there. It's not being demonized anymore. It's being seen as possibly a miracle drug, and it's only a matter of time before the people that are still anti eventually start come around once and for all, because they're now the minority. So the stigma has been tough. We've had some programming and some indoctrination, but I think time's up on that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because that's one of the things I had, honestly, is I had a misconception that, okay, marijuana is hemp and CBD and everything, and I don't want that. I don't want crazies driving and, smoking marijuana, because I know it's a hallucinogen and it's a gateway drug, like all those misconceptions, right? And I think it's very interesting, because now I'm starting to see a little bit more of the research, and my opinion is pivoted toward more like, okay, it's, you think about all those organic Chinese, herbs, right? It's kind of very similar along the line where it's like, okay, you can holistically, heal yourself in certain things with this CBD and hemp. And I just find that very interesting. Now, you did mention something I kind of want to pivot back around here is, obviously you're seeing stress, anxiety, definitely US culture. We tend to be more anxious and we tend to be more like just on pills and medication more than any other culture, just because we're very driven and, there's a lot that goes into it. But I would like to kind of, ask you in regards like, what are you seeing right now? And obviously you're on the forefront. I mean, we've all heard stories about how hemp has helped, like you just said, sleeping patterns and just holistic, care and things like that, and stress, anxiety. But I would just like to get maybe a few more like, examples, if you will, of like
Yeah,
what you're
some
seeing, and
anecdotes.
then as well as like how to really take this to the next level.
Yeah. So, I mean, how I got into it's interesting because it really puts that at the forefront. So, I was introduced to a girl that had 10,000 seizures a year, and I was at a fundraiser at her house, and she had a grand mal seizure and went down head first. I mean, and it was frightening. I mean, to hear her head hit the concrete, and there was half family at the party, half people that were there to support the family, and the half that was there to support the family was so scared that when the ambulance came, they left. And what I saw was the family look at the rest of the family and say, "Hey, did you check the chicken out at the buffet and give me another drink?" And they were completely desensitized, which was really wild to a psych guy. I was like, wow, they must see this a lot, because this just affected like my next 2 weeks, thinking about how frightening what just happened, was. Well, here, ambulance came, rushed her to the hospital. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from my business partner. He said they just sent Hannah home from the hospital. They don't know what's wrong with her. They can't identify exactly what it is. They know it's some form of Dravet or seizure syndrome, but her organs are now shutting down because it's so great. They gave her 2 weeks to live and told her to start hospice. He said, "You have to find this oil." And he hung up the phone on me. And I remember seeing my computer screen just get further and further away as I'm thinking in the back of my head, how am I going to find this oil? It is, at the time, it was so illegal in Pennsylvania. Here, I picked up the phone. I called every single person in a state that was legal that I had access to. And within about 4 hours, I was on the phone with a major university on the East Coast, who I'll leave their name out of it just because it was technically illegal at the time. They custom compounded me a 16-to-1 THC to CBD ratio. It's very high THC. We ended up getting it to this girl with about 11 days left on this death sentence. Gave her one drop in her feeding tube, literally the size of a grain of rice. And this girl had been immobile for 2 days, end of life. Doesn't communicate much to begin with, but couldn't talk or make any sounds. And within about 7 minutes of having that drop hit her system, she was up. And within about half an hour after that, she had so much energy and was walking around that her parents had to put a helmet on her. And that was that was October of 2014. And to give you an idea, they gave her 2 weeks. She's now 19 years old, communicating with her mother. Her quality of life has gone through the roof. Her family's quality of life has gone through the roof. It was that the moment that I saw that is when I said, I'm not looking back. That's when I started really getting it out into people's hands and seeing what it does. And, with someone with PTSD, like let's say a veteran, they have an onset of PTSD. They take one hit from a vaporizer, which is a very quick onset. And then all of a sudden they're forgetting about what they were just triggered by. You have people that drink a lot of alcohol, surprisingly integrate cannabis into their social life, and all of a sudden the alcohol starts to diminish. Now, I was one of those guys. I like to drink and have fun, and I grew up with 4 brothers and a dad. We all like to drink and party, and all of a sudden cannabis hit my world, and I started looking at myself and saying, why would I do that to myself? As far as pain, anxiety, inflammation, and sleep, you take a single brownie that we make in our facility. When it's paired with dietary fats, you get a lot more bioavailability. And literally you could, you're asleep in an hour and you get the best sleep of your life, probably a couple hours longer than you're used to. We just started experimenting with CBG, which is the one that's kind of a focus-based cannabinoid. And here, just a little bit of that in the morning feels like you had a coffee all day long, which is really nice. I do a podcast with Charlie Batch. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're familiar. Charlie has tinnitus in his ear really bad from, believe it or not, his last drive of his career, he got his bell rung, and he had a concussion, a head injury, that he has this ringing in his ear, and he can't sleep. And he actually reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about us hanging out and let's talk cannabinoids? I'm ready to tell the world that I started using this stuff and it's helping me with pain management and all this." He said, "I'm still having problems with sleep." And here we custom compounded the sleeping pill with CBN, and now he sleeps 2 more hours a night than he typically would. So we're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's really, it's almost like I don't think necessarily that it's a single cannabinoid that's doing certain things. It's that we didn't have this in our diet, and now that we're getting it, a lot of the problems we're having are starting to fall off because we're giving our body what it needs. For instance, if you took air away from your respiratory system, you would die. If you took blood or water or one of the elements out of your blood, you would die. Same thing with the endocannabinoids. So we haven't had it for all this time. So we're starting to see all these ailments. Really, like depression is huge right now. Like everybody's depressed, everybody's stressed. Well, is it because the system that helps deal with stress doesn't have all the molecules that it needs to do what it does? And I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that over the next 5 to 10 years. It's really going to be commonplace. But as far as things you're seeing, I mean, it's really, if you have a problem in some sense and you start to ingest this thing that your body needs, you start to see that problem go away. And I think we're going to see a lot more things that we find that it's beneficial for pretty soon.
Now, so let's talk a little bit about this, because I mean, obviously I see culture kind of embracing this much more than, let's say, for example, government regulations. And I know government regulations, it's pretty tough. So what are you seeing, like, in regards to like the hurdles that will cause stagnation for this growth?
The pharmaceutical industry is a huge problem. 9 million people last month took a sleeping pill, and we all invite. If I put out a questionnaire right now and said, if I say sleeping pill, what's the first word that comes to mind? 90% of them are going to say Ambien. CBN at half the dose of Ambien works better than Ambien. That's bad for pharma's profits. So they're willing to put, I think I read some statistics. They put something like, $500 million last year into lobbying alone. That's more than they put into research, less than they put into marketing. So it's bad for them. And that's the major opponent, because they really have their tentacles in. When I got to work with these legislators, it's really interesting to see the guy that runs the House, Mike Turzai. I'll say your name out loud. Mike Turzai was saying no. And Mike Turzai it's no mystery that he's funded by pharma. His wife is a doctor that is referring this to patients with seizure disorders. She goes on the record saying, I don't know why he won't approve this. I don't know why he won't do it. Here it's because he's funded by pharma. And it got to the point where they had the news cameras, they had everyone in his office saying why. He breaks down crying, saying that he doesn't want his kids to get addicted, which is why he won't legalize it. When we all know damn well it's because he's getting paid off by pharma. That's where we're at with it. And I don't think they can keep it bottled up much longer. With an adoption rate, I think like something like 95% of the population thinks this is beneficial now, but they have been the major impediment. And then the other thing is, because we've been so indoctrinated, the people that are in power still have that smell, right? They still think that that's the case. And it's not. And getting over that, like, typically they have to know someone that it worked for, and they have to have heard the anecdotal stories before they're willing to open that door towards adopting it or being okay with it. But our major problem is special interest. Again, it's just a different special interest this time around.
Now, I know your company that you're the CMO for, it's the THC-free hemp-based ingredients and consumer products. What are you seeing in the industry? Are you feeling like some products are just put the name and label on it, and it does not actually have the ingredients that? Because I know you guys go through a very rigorous process to be fully certified and qualified, and you guys have a high expectation for yourself, which is really cool to see. So what are you seeing in the industry regarding to THC kind of consumer products?
Yeah, so you have that's a great question, because you have a lot of people shooting from the hip. All right. And I talk about this in my book, but the law of authority is a very powerful law that will affect your psyche. And what I mean by that is, if someone has a white coat on and they tell you something, they talk about something you don't understand, you believe them, right? Because they look the part, they sound like they know. Now, imagine this. For the last 100 years, no one's really been able to touch this, except the hippies kept it alive. And then you had California that got into it first. who gets into it first are the marijuana enthusiasts, right? The guy wearing the tie-dyed shirt with the long hair that, yeah, man, smoke a joint. Okay. Well, you had a couple of those guys are good at science, and they could go and they could buy an Apex extractor that's as difficult as operating a commercial grade washing machine. Do I want butter? Do I want wax? Do I want this? It's 3 settings. 20% down deposit, and boom, they got the machine. They're able to pay the machine off within 2 weeks at what it was going for back then. Well, now those guys became the experts early, right? Now imagine in the gold rush, or in any gold rush, people from the East Coast heard about it on the West Coast. They all trucked out through the mud and the muck and the crap, and they bought a shovel and a pan, and now they're professional gold miners to the people on the East Coast, even though they're putting mercury in the water, and the air quality is getting destroyed, and the water's turned pink from all the chemicals that are in it. That's kind of what we've been seeing over the last 20 years is you have what I call the first waivers jump in. And at the end of the day, we're moving on to second wave now, and you're starting to see the adults come in. They care about consistency, standardization. When you look at what Coca-Cola is going to want, should they put this in there, they want standardization. They want it to be the exact same thing every single time. Where the industry was, up until now, they don't really even understand that. They're all strain based. You've heard of Blue Dream and, White Widow and all these different strains. It's grow it as White Widow, press it into a jar, add mint flavor, and now you have White Widow, flavored stuff that you can drop. And the hippies and the enthusiasts like that, but like I said, Coca-Cola doesn't. So what do? We take the stuff, we standardize it, we test it, we do shelf life testing. We do, after 2 years, how much of the stuff ended up sticking to the sides that's not getting into the system? How much of it converted to a different cannabinoid? Is it going out the door the way it's supposed to be and the way it says on the lab test? And with these guys shooting from the hip, I'll give you an example. When you grow a harvest, okay, and you plant seeds for the first time, everyone has this mission that they're going to do it organic. They're going to do it the right way, right by the book. Well, then they see their first mite or spider, on the plant, and they realize, oh my God, I'm going to lose $1 million harvest if I don't deal with this. And then they find out the only thing they can use to destroy it now that it's already there is some sort of chemical. And that's been the other whack-a-mole we've been playing with the government is someone's add an Eagle 20 now to get rid of that. And Eagle 20, they find out it's hurting people's lungs. And so there's a lot of stuff we don't know yet. A lot of the guys that were shooting from the beginning, they're going to start to get weeded out. You're going to start to see adults like us. But we're on top of it. My co-founder came from basically drug testing on the other side. He worked for, the government, basically, making sure that stuff didn't have THC in it. And, so we went into it with the right mindset, with the right team, and everything we put out is exactly as it should be. And we look forward to tighter regulation, because that's going to help weed out the guys that are putting whatever into a bottle and calling it medicine. Now, the problem is it works, right? The plant in its natural form works. The plant with additional chemicals in it also works because the actives are in there. It's a matter of what's it doing to your body, outside of the good stuff and how are those chemicals hurting you. So we'll be finding out a lot more in the next couple of years as we really start to identify all the different things that people are putting in. Like, for instance, you heard about the vitamin E problem, and all these people dying from vaporizer pens. Here they found out the problem was vitamin E. Well, first thing I think is, how the hell, or why would they put vitamin E in? It doesn't make any sense. Not even it's an expensive carrier oil. They could use other things. Well, here it was because the first wave of hemp farmers didn't understand that you need to separate your male and female plants. And now the male and female plants are all in one harvest, and females all have seeds. Well, when you throw it all in an extractor, the seeds produce vitamin E. Not bad to eat, but the second you inhale it, it's causing all these problems. And these are things that just as the industry unfolds, we'll figure out. But our company definitely stays on top of, we play it by the book, and we do it the way you should. And eventually that's how everyone's going to be once the government steps up and starts enforcing the laws that they put out.
So as a consumer, what should you look for when you're finding these products? You see the value in it, but you just don't want to be taken advantage of. You want to be coming in as an educated consumer. And so, just kind of share with our audience what they should be aware of when they're looking through this stuff.
So the first thing I would do is look at a lab test. The problem is most people don't know how to look at a lab test. And the other problem is these guys will get selective lab tests, right? So where they might know that they have some of the chemicals they shouldn't, they'll just get a THC test. So people know, oh, I'll look for the lab test. They go, oh yeah, look, the THC levels are legal. I'm good. But there's 100 other things that aren't on that lab test that could be a problem. Heavy metals, like for instance, hemp naturally picks up the heavy metals in the dirt that it's in, and it can be used to remediate. Like, you know, you plant hemp seeds all around Hiroshima, and it's going to pull that radioactive metal out of the ground. But the problem is, then it goes into whatever you ingest. So those are the things you need to look for. Now, in the future, what we're going to see is we're going to see this at Walgreens. We're going to see it at Walmart. We're going to see it at GNC. We're starting to see it at Vitamin Shop. Going to a good retailer that has done the homework for you is going to be your best bet right now if you don't know what to look for in a lab test. And so that's my suggestion, is go to a Vitamin Shop. You can go to puresynergistics.com. That's ours. But you know, work with a company that's reputable. And the best thing is just go with the company you know that's going to do the fact checking for you.
Do you see, because you know, you brought something up which I found very interesting. You know, it's going to be part of like our nutritional scale, if you will. So like, obviously I know I need X amount of water. I know I need X amount of fruits and veggies and things like that. Do you think at some point where it'll be integrated? I don't know if it's 10, 15 years down the way, but it'll in health class, it'll be integrated into the educational system where it's like, hey, this is something that your body needs to ABC.
So yeah, yes, I think eventually in health class, they're going to have to teach that because it's now a fact. Interestingly, one of the guys on my executive team, he comes from the functional food world. He's been in nutraceutical and functional foods for about 20 years. And he specifically said when he came on board, he said, you know, we didn't know about protein needs and things like that 25 years ago. But now you go in and you look at every cereal in the cereal aisle and it says 20 grams of protein, 5 grams of protein, whatever it is, it's a call out. We believe that it's going to be a call out eventually where people look at it and they know they're going to be able to get their cannabinoids from that particular CPG.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I just think that's, yeah, that's revolutionary actually. And so let's talk a little bit about, you know, you brought something up here, and I do want to just kind of emphasize this a little bit because, you know, you wrote the Molecular Influence book. Okay. And I know we're pivoting slightly, but it's, you know, successfully hack the minds of potential investors, customers, partners, and more. And really just helping, like raising money, negotiating deals, closing clients. First of all, I mean, coming from, you know, you're a 7-time founder, kind of, you know, entrepreneurial, you know, serial entrepreneur kind of background to, you know, obviously really making, you know, taking those skills and applying it to the hemp world. And then obviously writing this book, you know, what is your goal with it to be able to help facilitate just better, higher leverage, you know, skills? And what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you where I realized where it all kind of came together. I was working in the cannabis industry at the time, and I started realizing how difficult it was to influence someone that was so radically opposed to an idea, and that was cannabis. I mean, they were so everyone was radically opposed. When I realized that there's a methodology and almost a certain period of time that you have to allow after someone gets information for that dissonance tied to the indoctrination to lift before they're even in a place where they can start to take in the information that you just gave them. You know, that's really what that's about. Now, when it comes to raising money, you know, same thing. You hit somebody, they don't want to give their money away. They need influenced at that point. Well, how do you start getting them excited? How do you, you know, like a Pavlovian dog, get them to start to salivate when you ring a bell? And you know, you realize that's a systematic approach. What is it that the person across from you needs to hear to start to remove that dissonance or the ideation that they were tied to, or how do I get them to start swimming in my direction? And you know, that's really how the book came across. And it was when I was in the middle of this industry that I realized, holy shit, I'm actually really, really good at this, because there's not many people that could get hit with radical opposition. And I would just know. I'll give you an example. We had to go out and really sell this to the local municipalities that we wanted to put our dispensaries in. And there was a lot of speaking at these community gatherings, right? And I was in Lawrenceville. It's a location in Pittsburgh. And the way that they do these community meetings, they have the chief of police get up and talk about deaths and crime and stuff first. Like, you go over whatever just happened within the last month. And then they talk about some of the other stuff related to politics and the government. And then they go on and they hear from the townspeople, right? And it's this quorum. Basically, everyone gets together, right? So I'm supposed to talk after the chief of police does his thing, and there's a guy in the background and that's standing in the back that has his arms crossed and he is pacing back and forth. And we already know we're the cannabis guys. He's waiting for his chance to say something to us, which we're used to. And I knew it was coming. And I was trying to soften the blow. And this is where this stuff comes in. I had to throw something in that guy's peripheral to kind of back him off of the radical so that I could at least get in. And as I'm thinking about this, the chief of police said, in last week, we had 4 opioid overdose deaths. Now, I knew that if in states where they legalized cannabis, the opioid overdose deaths went down by 25%, like overnight. And he handed the ball to me, and I said, I thank you for that. And I want to let you guys know, when they legalize this in a state, these deaths go down by a quarter. So, one more family member would have been here this week if we would have this dispensary here last year. And every minute we wait, we're losing more people. And that dude, his arms went down. And I knew, all right, I got past the first gauntlet, right? And it was as soon as we ended, and he learned a lot. So we started to soften him up a little bit. I went and talked to him afterwards, and he told me he lost his daughter to, I forget what it was. I think it was heroin. And it started with pain pills, which like it always does. And because I said that, it was enough to get into his psyche for him to listen. And by the end of our conversation, he said, do you think there's a chance my other daughter could work here? Because I had no idea. And I'd like for her to be able to help people that possibly lost their life like my other daughter. And to see that turnaround within 1 hour, you almost go out and you say, I want to write a book, because if we could all do this to each other, we get along better, and people could understand everybody's angles and things like that. But, really the buyer is a business, somebody that's looking to sell more, raise money. But if you go in and your goal, I always start with, you need a goal. If your goal is, I want to win that dude over, or I need to, this guy needs to give me money, you can start to form the conversation so that all the things that person needs to check in their mind get checked off. And then it becomes a conversation as opposed to an argument. And that's kind of the basis of the book, is if you just know what they need to hear, and you've kind of thought it out beforehand, you can massage any conversation to be in your favor. And, hopefully everybody uses it for good. But, ultimately influence is a very powerful thing, and possibly the most powerful weapon of war, depending on how you want to use it.
That's awesome. I appreciate you kind of diving in and really sharing that story. I think it's awesome. Now, what in this book, because what techniques do you find that are very effective that you share with the reader that you still implement today? Like you said, obviously that was tonality, that was a story, that was obviously some, a lot of factual evidence as well. But like you really put a picture in their head. But if you could just kind of share with me a little bit like more, strategies or techniques that you have found that are really effective.
Yeah, let me take a step back and I'll tell you how I got there, so that the listener understands kind of this consortium of different disciplines, right? So my dad started a company called Guardian Protection Services. They went from went from his garage to the largest privately held home security company in the country. Actually 6th largest overall, behind ADT and Protection One and the big dogs. I saw that entrepreneur every day. I got up, we ate breakfast, and then he left, and I sat at the window and I waved goodbye, and I wondered, what's dad doing? Why isn't he here playing with me? And he would come home and he would tell me about work. And, at 5, 6 years old, I started to catch on to what he was doing. Now put a pin in that. My grandpa, his father, was a magician, and I was the oldest grandson. So I was very frequently used as a prop in the magic trick. So to give you an idea, someone, me, gets put in a box. My grandpa would say, look, you're going to get cut in half. I just, I need you to act like you're not getting cut in half and just act cool. And I'll do the rest of the work. Just that's your part. And for the first time to have the crowd going, thinking I'm getting cut in half when I know damn well I'm not getting cut in half, you start to realize, wow, perception's reality. And what did Pappy do to set that up so that worked out the way he wanted to? And I learned a lot of his stuff, a lot of the card tricks, and you start to see just the methodology in making sure that you pull it off the right way, the same way every time. And no matter what people say, do it again. And you could literally do it again, and they will not catch the trick. They will only see the outcome, and that's their reality. Well, my father started asking me to go to the home and garden show. So this is when I was 5, 6, and 7, home and garden show where he sold security systems. And I became part of his white collar magic trick, where if there was a family walking by that had children, I grabbed candy from the candy bowl and I had to intercept that child and talk with him about candy long enough for my dad to have a conversation with his parents about fire safety, security, and things of that nature. And you remember back then, selling security was tough because it wasn't like it is now, where it's just you buy a house and everyone thinks you should get it. It was $1,500 to put a system in. It wasn't free like it is now, and it was a bigger sale. So he had to do a lot of grinding to get into someone's house and then eventually sell it. Well, across the aisle from us every year was another guy from Pittsburgh, and he would sell Wash-O-Matic, Salsa-Matic, Vegematic. Anything he did was a Matic, and it was basically just his spin on a product that we already had. So this particular year, and I was always amazed by the guy, but I was 7 now, and I must have had bigger balls at this point, and I which I'll get to in a second. But I saw him selling 2 of these mops to every single person. And I'm kind of tuning out of what I'm doing with my dad, and I'm focused on what he's doing. And I'm wondering, how is he getting them to buy 2 each? Like, my dad has to literally kiss 300 people's asses to get 1 sale. He's selling 2 to everybody. And there was a missing piece of information here. A couple walked past me, and the husband had 2 mops over his shoulder and the wife had 2 mops. And the wife looks at the husband right within an earshot of me and said, "It really sucks that you can only buy 2 of these." And I realized that was it. He had another integer that he was placing in there that was creating this magic trick to end the way he wanted. So I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Mays, I'd love to know how to do what you do, but eventually do it better." And that guy is Billy Mays, the OxyClean guy. Hey, I'm Billy Mays with OxyClean, right? He was from Pittsburgh, same town as my dad, McKees Rocks. And he said, "All right, kid, when I do my next show," and the way he did, he had a 12-inch riser stage. He had the earpiece. He had the blue shirt with the khakis, same as you know him now. Rest in peace. But he said, "I want you to stand next to me, and you're going to see one by one. I'm going to pick off the women, then I'm going to pick off the men, and then the kids are going to want to be involved, and then I'm going to hit them with an offer they can't refuse, and they're all going to buy 2." And this literally went over my head because I'm just hearing it, right? Well, he started calling people up, and he usually had about 20, 30 people that would actually come up to his booth because he had the whole thing, the whole setup. And he said, he says, "Have you women ever spilled marinara sauce on your precious grout?" You see about like half the women shake their head. He says, "Watch this." He pours marinara on the grout and he sucks it right up with this stuff. He said, "Look, nothing to worry about." And the husbands are like, "Who cares?" Right? And he says, "Yeah, but have you ever spilled motor oil on your precious garage floor, guys? I know you have." And then you see half the guys like, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That stain that I can't get rid of." He says, "Yeah, if you guys buy for your wives today, I'm going to throw in this special," and he throws out this sand on the ground. He picks all the oil up. And then the kids are like, "I want to try it." And like the kids are all, and he said, "Look, you all know someone with a back problem, or maybe your mother, because this mop basically squeegeed itself. Like back then they didn't have the squeeze, the mop that did its own squeegee. Now we see them all over the place." He says, "If you buy today, I'm going to throw in a second one because now you guys will have your Christmas gift. You won't even have to think about it." And sure enough, right there, hand over fist, everyone's forking out their $20. They take all the units that he has at the front of the stage. They think they got the last one. They're walking away happy. He walks around the back, counting his money, and then fills them up with a whole new set of mops that he's getting from China for probably 50 cents a piece. And that really changed my outlook on influence as like immediately at 7 years old. Well, I ended up going through life looking at my dad as the best salesman of all time, besides Billy Mays. My superheroes were Billy Mays, Spider-Man, and Michael Jackson. I ended up getting to college, and I had a choice now in what I did. And I went to psych school, and I worked with rats in a Skinner box. And it's funny because as you realize that first time that rat pushes that lever, you're like, wow, I manipulated its environment in a completely sterile environment. I now have that rat controlling its own destiny by clicking this thing and getting its own food. And to get to that point, you had to do certain things. You had to shock its feet so it moves around enough. You had to get it to push it. Once it pushes it once, you got a light and a thing, like a light and a siren. And it doesn't put 2 and 2 together until you do this over and over and over again. But that one day that rat goes, "Holy shit, did I just do that?" Pushes it again, pellet, pushes it again. And it will sit there and push that thing 300 times. And you realize, okay, animals don't lie. I had to do certain things to figure out how that mind worked. And now I can apply that to humans moving forward, or other pets, or whatever it is. And that's kind of the basis of how the book got started. Is I had real psych. I had street psych, and I had my dad's white collar psych that he was kind of putting together to get, to do what he was doing. And at the end of the day, Molecular Influence was born. And what happened was I wrote the book, taking into account all the things that I gathered through psych school and life. And after I was done, I realized this isn't in a format that's easy to follow. It's almost like they have to learn everything I learned, and I don't want it that way. I want it to be systemized. And I basically scrapped it, and I started from scratch with a drawing of how I get from A to B. And I was able to break that down into stages. And then within each stage, I was able to leverage psych laws, so that you really don't have to worry about too much until you get to a certain level. And you just got to focus on 6 things at these 2 different levels. And basically how that works is, first thing you do is you want to set a goal. A lot of people go into a sale or a pitch, and they don't necessarily have their exact finite goal. Yeah, they might say, I want to sell this guy. Well, I sold security and home technology for 10 years. I realized I could go into a meeting, say, I want to close this deal, and I'll get the deal, but it might be small on the volume, but I get the deal. Well, one day I'm sitting there, I'm 2 hours early for a meeting. And we would bring people into our office and demonstrations. And when I'm alone and bored, I'm nuts. Like, I got ADD and I'm kind of neurotic. So like, I'll pace and do something. I'm like, what can I do? And I thought, well, I hate doing 7 different pieces of paperwork. So let me start filling them out now. So when I get to the close, that's already done. And then I got all the typical stuff, like their name, address, and all that stuff. And I thought, well, I think they're going to buy this, and this. And I thought, man, this is what I think the total should be. It was 23,126, let's say. Well, the average selling price for the company was about 1,800. My average selling price was 18,000. And I decided I was going to pick 23,126 out of the air. Filled out all the paperwork, went into my manager at the time, and I said, here, you can sign this. He says, but you're meeting them in an hour. I said, this is what it's going to be for. And he says, you're crazy, dude. Next morning, I handed them the paperwork. They signed it, $23,126. And it's because I picked that number out, and I built a bunch of scenarios that would be the most comfortable for them to land on, based on their neighbors and the place of the world they're living and the school they're going to, and what their neighbors might have, and what it would be like to go to the Super Bowl to your neighbor's house and watch it on his big screen, and you might not have that. I built a world where they salivated over that particular package. And, that's the kind of goal you want to look at going into something. So first thing is you form a goal. The next thing is you have to plan for that initial meeting or that initial exposure point. And I like to say to the millennials these days, no, you can't wear your big hoop earrings that are stretch your ears out. No, you shouldn't have a tattoo going up your neck if you expect a white collar businessman from the old school to invest money in you. You can't. Cover it up. I know the world tells you to express yourself these days. Well, that's fine. But if you want this, cover it up, because that person's going to judge you. And why? Because we've been built to do that as a safety precaution to our own body. And it's, you look back at the, age-old cultures, they would try to find similarities, or else you would die on a trail in the middle of the woods when, you go from your, colony to someone else's. You meet someone else, you don't even speak the same language. They would sit down and try and find things that made them similar. And they don't want to see things that are different. For instance, we don't go up and pet a saber-toothed tiger because it has sharp features, different eyes. It's got teeth that aren't like ours. It's very different than us. We would lose a hand. So that's built into the human genome to kind of look for similarity and things that are pleasing to you. Otherwise, you get turned off. So plan for that initial impression. Once you get past that and all things are good, your next goal is to elicit emotion. All right. If you can elicit emotion in your favor, now they're starting to align with you as opposed to oppose you. And some of the ways you can do that, like common goal, right? Like we have a common goal together. Now we're both looking at the same thing. Yeah, we have differences, but we're fighting for the same thing. So I'm going to overlook those differences. I can get past certain arguments because I know we're all trying to get there. It becomes more of a conversation. A common enemy. I always say, we have Muslims and Catholics and Jews, and everybody hates each other, let's say, okay? But the second the aliens have a gun pointed at Earth, no one cares what religion you are. It's us versus them. I think that's a lot of reason why the government doesn't tell us there's aliens, because they don't want us to bond together. But you find that common goal or common enemy, and that's one of those things. Telling a story that really shows your passion. When all else fails, tells a story. That's one of the things I say, right? I got to be in a situation. You've been in situations where you're in a social environment and like no one's connecting and it's weird, right? It's slowly getting weirder, right? It's like uncomfortable and you're drinking more, like, and you're wondering like, oh my God, why am I in this room? You could jump out in the middle of that group and start telling a story, and all of a sudden people start to connect with a piece of that story, and they kind of start to look at you as the hero of that story, and you're able to integrate things and ideas, and that you become someone different than the person they're just seeing physically. So story will do it. Showing your passion towards something is another one of those. So you basically elicit emotion through one of these six ways. Once you have them emotionally, now you kind of have the deal. It's going to be the little details that might lose them. That's where you need to surround them with indisputable logic. And that's where I get into a lot of the laws of Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And I'll give you an idea. We talked about authority. If you prove you're the authority, they have a lot of reason to trust you, right? And I got a funny story. I walked into a CBD store. We were looking at competitors a couple of years ago. And I walked in and there was two young guys with white lab coats on. And I started asking them questions because I know a lot of stuff. And I figured I was going to walk in and no one was going to know anything. And I was blown away at how these young kids in lab coats knew what they were talking about. And for some reason, it just imprinted that they were doctors. And I bullshit with the guys for a little bit longer. And I found out the one guy's in a band and he plays saxophone. I said, hey, I got a band and we just haven't been looking for a sax player. Well, you want to come by the house and try out? He says, yeah. He comes over and I'm asking him, I don't know what happened. I introduced him to the guys and I said, tell the guys what you do. And he says, I work at the CBD store. And I says, but you're a scientist, right? And he said, no. And it confused me because I saw him, and even though I knew he wasn't a scientist, and here 2 or 3 times after that, I introduced him as a scientist because it was so ingrained in my mind that that's who he was, because he knew what he was saying and he had the white lab coat on. So when you prove that you're the authority, that's a checkbox. Like, okay, I trust that part. If you can prove social proof, meaning you can find a tie back to someone they know that can validate you or your product or your service or whatever you're doing, that's another checkbox. If there's only so much of it available, like fear of missing out. How many times have you seen something, you're like, I want that, but I'll get it later. And it says, well, there's one left. And you're like, the time is now. I better do it now. That's because FOMO, fear of missing out, is a very strong influencer to leverage and or happen to you. I mean, it just happens. Commitment and consistency. If you say, yes, I'm going to do something, chances are you're going to try and do that. Even if, it's difficult, you said to someone, I'm going to do it. So like researchers, they took sales reps that were closing at an 18%. Every single time they're closing 18%. And they said, look, we just want you to get the client or the potential customer, the prospect, to say yes 3 times. It could be related to your product or service, but we almost don't care if it's about pizza. Do you like pizza? Yes. If you get them to say three yeses, we want to then measure after that. Well, here, closing percentage went from 18% to 32%, just from that simple thing. So if you're able to surround them with this indisputable logic and start throwing out these things that are checks in the mind, now you have a brain that's in a homeostatic environment for making a decision comfortably, as opposed to just, backing up and saying no just out of a defense mechanism because they don't have all the information they need. And that usually is the problem, because if they're sitting across the table from you, chances are they're interested in what you're doing already. It's a matter of making sure they're interested in doing business with you. And I always say people like to do business with friends. So it's a good thing is to make sure you stay on that social norm side as opposed to the market norm, because that will change things. But once you then have all those check boxes checked, you're at about a 90% chance of getting what you want. The only other factor is, are you timing the close correctly, the ask? Sometimes you do it too early, you're not ready yet. Sometimes you want to back away and wait, and maybe then hit them with a FOMO opportunity. Like, hey, by the way, there's only a couple of these left. I know you're interested before. But when you do those 5 steps in a row, I mean, I could say, honest to God, it's a 90% chance that if you set that goal in the beginning and you do all these things in between, you're gonna get compliance as to whatever it was that was impeding you from getting your goal. And it's a very simple to follow system. And I have my disciples, as I like to call them, the people that were early adopters, that when I was out doing my speaking engagements across the East Coast to kind of really find out if what I was talking about was legit, they come back to me on a weekly basis. Hey, I use molecular influence here, and here's what happened, and here's how I got around it. It's really cool to think that I was going to put that book out in a very difficult to digest way. And here, after I came back and drew a picture and really made it a system that it was easy for just anybody to follow and use in any situation. And, that's kind of the high level and the basics of it. And it's some powerful stuff. The human mind's a pretty interesting thing. And if you know how to work with it, you can get what you want.
Definitely. Well, I really appreciate you diving deep into that, because what I found so interesting, what you're saying is these are skills that you can acquire over a period of time. And what I love about like molecular influence is it's a strategic approach, right? Focusing on one skill, acquiring that, and then moving on to the next. And there's just, there's obviously levels to it. And naturally you're, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're like 11, right? You're just above and beyond where you're able to get into that higher level.
I see it physically when I'm in a room. And I like to joke and I say it's my superpower because I don't really get mad. Like, you'll never see me get mad, but I will get mad when I have a friend that's getting duped by someone else's manipulation or psychology, because I see it as if it's like sixth sense. It's when something's coming out of somebody's mouth, I almost see it going, wait, they're trying to do this to your brain. Hold up, because I know what that'll do. Like, I'll give you an example. Anchoring information is so powerful. Carnegie Mellon researcher, Dana Rowley is his name. He took a classroom of kids and he wanted to test the power of anchoring. And anchoring is when you say something first, right? And they have an anchor point to kind of start from. He asked all the kids in the room, he said, I want you to take the last 2 digits of your social and write it in the upper corner of this piece of paper. And on the piece of paper was a bunch of different products, like a wine bottle, a bottle of wine, a joystick, a mouse, a keyboard, like just random stuff. And they all wrote the last 2 digits their social. Well, when he took all them in and put them on a spreadsheet, they found out that the people that had a social that was 20 or lower, the final 2 numbers were under 20, versus the people that had a social 80 or over. And again, we're just talking about the last 2 numbers. The difference in perceived value of the items was 236% higher. So if you have a 14 as your last 2 digits, you thought the bottle of wine cost $10, whatever, and this other person thought it was like 26 because their numbers were 80 or more. And to think about that, I mean, that's ridiculous as to how powerful that is. Just because they looked at a number, wrote it down first, and then were asked what they thought of a value of something else. So little things like that are so powerful. And if you just know they're out there and you know how to place that little bit in someone's peripheral, you know that you have created the starting point. And they have no idea that just happened. Unbelievably powerful stuff, and cool to learn and utilize. And it's not that difficult. It's a matter of just kind of taking it in and thinking to yourself, wow, how could I leverage that or use that moving forward? But cool stuff.
Yeah, what I find so interesting specifically about this is the perception concept, right? Because obviously it is definitely in today's world, you can perceive someone as, oh, this is just like you were saying with the doctor situation, right? Even because they had the white coat on, obviously they were perceived, oh, they're very knowledgeable, they're whatever, even though I may not know anything about them. I do know, like, obviously, doctors, like Dr. So-and-so. I don't know what kind of doctor they are, but hey, obviously they did something that's cool. Obviously they're elevated. And so I do find that just so interesting. I definitely see that in the coaching consulting world, definitely when they're published other places, or even when they're aligned or take pictures or featured or, collaborate with other higher level leveraged individuals. Now all of a sudden that perception is like, oh, they must be, top dog or whatever. Very, very interesting stuff.
Well, it's funny. You reminded me of something as you said that. My brother-in-law played college hockey for Duquesne, and I went to one of his games and brought a video camera, a really, big one, like professional grade. And I walked in and I said to the lady, is this the game? She goes, oh yeah, go ahead. You with the press? And I said, yes, I am. And I realized that if you just bring a professional camera anywhere you go, you get right past the gatekeeper, and it's just them seeing that. They didn't even ask me a question. Just go ahead. But it's extremely powerful. So yeah, you mentioned that, so that's good.
Well, that's why I found Catch Me If You Can, that movie and that guy's story. I forget the guy. That just was it's a good persuasion technique. It's just, you come in, even though you have no idea, it's confidence, it's going in there. People
Yep.
just believe you. And there's a lot of psychological things that go on. It's very dangerous if you deploy it the wrong way, but obviously I think it's just awesome to see how you can
catch me
make
if
an
you can. Here's
influence.
another cute one. This is in the book. So when I was in college, I went to WVU, West Virginia University. It was like the drinking capital of the world. But they still carded and they still made sure that you were of age. And basically, if I could get into the bar and sit across the table, sit the bar, I knew that if I can control the situation, I would get served. If I couldn't control the situation, they would card me. So it became a matter of, can I get enough information in their psyche so that they don't card me? And the way that I would do that, the system I built was I would walk in and I would flag them first. So I was the aggressor in the situation. And they'd come up and I'd say, hey, listen, rocks glass, I want a snow cone worth of ice, vodka, double shot, tiny bit of crayon, like so little that you could barely see the red because I'm diabetic. And if there's too much sugar, I'm going to go into a diabetic shock and you don't want to be dealing with that. With an olive, I know it's weird, but it's kind of like a martini, dirty martini with a little bit of sweetness. You got that? I gave more than 7 bits of information. Now, the reason they made phone numbers 7 pieces of information, right beside your area code, was because that's what we could remember, 7 blocks. The second I got to that 8th block, they were forgetting the first of the 7, and that was to card me. And since I made that system, I had not gotten carded one time in my life. I'm 42. I still look pretty young, but when I was 18, I looked like I was 14. So it was extremely powerful. But these are all things that I learned as kind of like a little gypsy from my dad and my grandpa. And you started using it in real world applications in situations where, most people don't get by. But yeah, it's there's little stories like that in the book throughout. So it's pretty cool.
I love it, man. It's just so strategic and it's just so fun. Now, how can our audience reach out to you and just connect with you, man, and obviously purchase the book, man?
So I like just telling people LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn every day. It's a great way, and no one has to remember how to spell my name or my company name, which is like 30 letters long. But LinkedIn, yeah, hit me up, Russ Cersosimo. I'm there. I'll answer it.
Awesome, guys. And those links will be in the description below. So make sure you guys connect there, which is really awesome. And Russ, before we let you go, I just appreciate the immense value that you brought in. Obviously, hitting those misconceptions definitely in the hemp, the CBD world, what's going on with the THC thing. And obviously, giving us an example of how, impactful your company is in that industry and how high of an expectation you guys have in the scientific side of things, which is really awesome. And then obviously talking about influence, perception, and really diving in some really, really incredible techniques. And obviously they can, get access to that with on Amazon. Those links will be in the description below. But Russ, is there any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience before we let you go?
Let's see, words of wisdom. Cut off the TV. That's what I like to tell people. I cut out TV in 2014, and I have become so productive that if I would have kept that TV on, I would never have gotten any of it done. And it sounds simple, but the average American watches TV for 6 hours a day. Think about what you couldn't do if you didn't have that. And I'm not saying your listeners watch TV, but the average is 6 hours. That's a big thing right there, is see how much you can get done. And it's amazing what you can achieve if you put your mind to it. And that's why I say in the book, just focus on a goal. I think a lot of days we're so inundated with information, and the next beep or chime or this, sit down and look at, what do I want to achieve, and vision board it and go out and start knocking it off. And I'm a guy that had no science background whatsoever, yet I run a lab with Carnegie Mellon lab scientists running around all day long, and I like to joke and say I went to West Virginia, and we were like the king of drinking. We didn't go to class, but here I got, Carnegie Mellon people looking up to me. And it's because, again, I would say this is a goal, and is unachievable as that seems. I'm going to go out and work hard until I am certain I can't do it, or certain I can. And it's amazing what you can achieve when you really go out and vision board and get to it.
That's awesome, guys. That is Russ, my man, the CMO of Hemp Synergistics. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.